And of course, I'm sitting there thinking as I'm clutching my pearls, is this person do they really mean to say this at the end of the day? We've been talking about the questions that you should ask if you are choosing people for your team. Just because you are the CEO or you are the founder, it doesn't mean that you have the interviewing skills to make sure you're making just the right choice for your team. And my advice is, if you have not had a lot of interviewing experience, get yourself a kitchen cabinet of people that have had that experience. Let them go through your candidates for the first round or the second round, and then you interview for the last rounds when they've gotten down to single digits, 1 to 3 candidates. Now you interview them for fit. If you don't have that kitchen cabinet, you have to interview them from the top to the bottom. And I've been giving tips on the kinds of questions that you can ask as the interviewer. And I'm going to give you a few more right now. One of the questions that you can ask is, give me 2 examples of times that you have failed and when things didn't go well. Now, this is an important question because based on their answer, you're going to be able to figure out whether or not this person has great judgment, because the question is, what failures do they use in this example? You're also going to be able to figure out whether or not they are resilient, because if they're smart, they're going to not only tell you about the failure, they're going to tell you why the failure happened, and you want to listen in for whether or not they take responsibility for the failure or whether or not they're apt to blame it on somebody else. But more importantly, they're going to close that answer with telling you either what they should have done or what they learned from that particular failure. Now you know that you have someone sitting in front of you who understands failure, who knows how to learn from failure, who is also resilient, and somebody who will take responsibility for things that happen under their watch. That's a pretty good candidate. If, on the other hand, the person is blaming everybody else for what transpired under their watch, they don't give you anything that they learned from it, and they're critical of others when they talk about what they might do differently, then I might give a pause on that particular candidate. Another question that you might ask is, give me a sense of the key deliverables in your last role. This is an important question because now you are getting to the nitty-gritty of what that person did in the last role. A lot of people will put on their resume that they executed this, or they completed that, or they were responsible for this or that. But when you ask them what their key deliverables were, now you're going to figure out whether or not they actually did the work or whether or not someone else did the work and they were a distant team member. If they can't give you a concrete answer about exactly what they were responsible for producing, I might pause there. And in fact, it would be an invitation for me to actually dig in a little bit deeper to understand what that person did exactly. Another question that you might ask is, what impact do you believe you had in your last organization? I love this question because this is the question that really will give you a sense of that person's judgment and whether or not they are humble but confident or whether or not they are arrogant. I always find it interesting when I ask this question to see how many times people say I versus we and I, a combination of the two. Because if they are humble and confident, they will talk about the specific things that they had responsibility for, or they will own the fact that they did not do it alone, that somebody else or other persons were involved in helping them to complete that task successfully. I love this question because it talks a lot about, it tells you as the interviewer a lot about the person's judgment. One other question I want to leave you with: would your last or current employer agree with the impact you had? or what might they say differently? I love this question because it also gives me a sense of whether or not the person is a pretty straight shooter. And it tells me something about how they view their last employer. Now, we all know that you're never supposed to speak ill of your last employer in front of the person that you are now interviewing with, because that gives them the sense that you might in fact speak negatively about them at some point. So you never want to do that. But you'd be surprised how many people I've asked that question of, and they will say something like, well, I don't think they really appreciated it. We worked really hard. Or I'm not sure they really even noticed. Or they weren't that kind of employer, or they weren't that kind of leader. And of course, I'm sitting there thinking as I'm clutching my pearls, is this person do they really mean to say this at the end of the day? And of course, that candidate is eliminated at the end of the day. So you want to hear what they have to say. If they are a great candidate, they're going to tell you exactly what their last employer said about their contribution. They might give you evidence from their last couple of reviews. And if this is an easy question for them to answer, then I know that they're right on the money, and that they're thoughtful, and that they're self-aware of the contribution that they're bringing to the table. Go get them.